Howdy. So, I have sometimes done a segment that we call Sylvie Answering Interesting Questions. And these are sometimes questions that were posed directly to me. Sometimes they're just something that Kevin or I came across on Reddit. When it's the case of coming across it on Reddit, often I don't answer it on Reddit, but I'll answer it here, hopefully to people who are interested in the question and the answer. I came across this the other day. This was a guy who was asking whether the Thai government has any kind of like health insurance or some kind of policy that takes care of the health of fighters after they retire. He was asking because he's had some trainers who had very mild, according to his description, health issues, but he could see that they were kind of struggling with stuff, and he wondered whether the Thai government helped in any way for that. Some of the answers were interesting in that people didn't actually know anything, but they were like, America doesn't do that, the UFC doesn't even give insurance to active fighters, like that kind of stuff. So, putting into context the reality of, you know, I don't know what governments do that. I'm from America, so we don't have, we only have privatized healthcare, really, and, you know, the NFL is not giving long-term health insurance to their retired players. There's all this stuff with CTE, blah, blah, blah. But the answer to the question about Thailand and the government is yes and no. No, in that there is no, like, the government itself is taking care of former fighters. But yes, in that organizations or kind of groups within the government do offer some aid to some fighters. So there's a couple versions here. One is the Tom organization, which is ex-fighters pay into this. It's like insurance. They pay in a very small amount annually, but it doesn't work as insurance in a, like, every time you have to go to the doctor or the hospital, it's gonna pay for it. More, it's like if there's something huge that you really would struggle to pay for or could not pay for, then the Tom organization kind of swoops in and offers hefty assistance to those kinds of things. So, for example, Napidet had a stroke and spent time in hospital, and they gave him money for that. Ajahn Gimyu recently broke his leg, and Ajahn Yai, who used to work with him at Sorpunjit and is part of the Tom organization, was asking me to send receipts, like medical certificates, to him so that he could get money to help assist Ajahn Gimyu from Tom. They did not pay for all of that. I paid for all of that, but they could help. They could help allay the cost of that. And in some cases, very sad cases, you'll see when fighters have passed, Tom will help pay for the funeral, or they will give money to the widow or the family of that fighter in order to kind of, like, I don't know, help. In Thai you say cholua, which just kind of means like help out, assist. So that's kind of the kind of thing that you have. And then I don't even know what it's called or what it is. Really, it seems like very, very few former fighters have this, and they tend to be older. But Ajahn Gimyu and Dieselnoy receive like a pension from the government, which is not significant. It's like 5,000 baht a month. But that helps a lot. You can't like live entirely off of that, but it helps for people who might not necessarily have steady income elsewhere and that kind of thing. But again, it is the government, but it's like a organization within the government, and it's not everybody. It's, you kind of have to like sign up for it and blah 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 and all these things. I also can't speak fully authoritatively on it because I don't know how all of it works. But the answer to that question is not really, and a little bit, yes. But the thing I actually wanted to answer here is not about whether the Thai government takes care of fighters after they retire, which I've just answered here. But actually it was a lot of the comments from people who don't know the answer to that, so they just answered what they were thinking anyway, which was basically to the effect of a lot of people agreeing with each other that, like, the way that Thailand works and fighters are treated is like this horrendous thing and this wear on the body and blah, 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 and all this stuff. They're like, oh, when you start fighting when you're 8, you have to retire when you're 23 because your body just can't take it anymore. And you guys, I just want to put into context some of this because, yes, it is hard to do anything for like 20 years, 30 years. That's hard on your body. Even, basketball players, football players in the US, they might have been playing since they were little kids, but then going professional, really doing it in earnest, that career is not going to be insanely long, but it's on a scale where, really old really old basketball players are playing into their like 40s, like that's considered insanely old in professional sports. But the reason I want to put some context into it is that, one, I think that people who don't have a lot of experience here or don't have a lot of understanding or whatever, just kind of like view through this keyhole that maybe is a little bit romanticized isn't quite the right word because it's a criticism, but it's this idea of like what the Thai fighter as a monolith's life is like. And I just want to put some context into that. One, there are lots of reasons you would retire when you're like 23 to 26 that have nothing to do with your body is so fucking broken you can't do it anymore. There are very, very few people in this world who did something all the time, like in a very intense way when they were 10, that they are still doing intensely when they're in their 20s. You get bored of shit. Like, you just don't want to do it anymore. When I think of examples of people who are like this, they're exceptional, They're like Tiger Woods, whose dad made him start playing golf when he was really little, or Simone Biles, who's been doing it for such an incredible amount of time, Serena Williams, people who started very, very young in order to have the insane skill that they have once they get into that competitive age, and then they have this kind of resilience, and they can last for a really long time, and it's remarkable. But people who wrestled in middle school and high school largely are not still doing that in their mid to late 20s. There's not necessarily a space for it. Like, you can be a stadium fighter in your 20s and 30s here, but can you still be competitive with someone in their prime who's 17 or something at that weight? Can you still make that weight that you have your name at, blah blah blah, all these different things? There are lots of reasons that are not physical for why you might retire. You might want to go abroad and earn better money than you would be making as a fighter. You might have an opportunity to do something else and you just decide to go do that other thing. I don't know a lot of fighters, and I've met a lot of fighters and I've talked to a lot of fighters. I don't know a lot of fighters who retire because they just physically can't take it anymore. When I think of fighters who kind of couch it in this idea of like it was just becoming too hard, it's mainly that their fights are drying up. So like Nam Kabuin or Diesel Noi, or even Put Pet Noi, like fighters who had incredible success when they got older, and Diesel Noi was not old, he retired at like 24, they have a harder time finding opponents because of all of the politics that go into being a big name, gambling, being competitive, whether promoters want to put you against other great fighters, blah, 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 all this stuff. And a lot of them, when they talk about it, it's that they were training so hard all the time, but without fights, or when they got fights, they were having to give up weight, or it was harder and harder to make the weight that they were at. And so it's like this kind of burned out exhaustion rather than like people retiring due to injury. I don't really know. I can't really name fighters that I can think of that retired due to injury. There are fighters who were greatly injured, but they didn't retire because of it. To my knowledge, if I look at like D-Lex's record, he had some pretty big, he had a leg break and a jaw break within a couple of years, and he kept fighting after those for a while. So I don't know. I think that Westerners kind of think of this like, oh, the body just fails and they can't fight anymore because they've been doing it for so long and they don't have the sports science. And I don't think that's right. And then a couple of the examples that this guy asking the question gave for the ill health or kind of like wear and tear on his trainers that made him wonder whether there's health insurance for these guys is stuff I see a lot of, like wrapping their wrists to hold pads, or having kind of not great knees, or things like that. And people chimed in being like, yeah, my trainer had really bad knees from running, or this, that, and the other thing, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And so yes, here's just a few pieces to consider when looking at that. One, being a trainer is very hard on your body. So this is not necessarily that they like ruined their bodies being a fighter and they would be in amazing health in their 40s as a trainer if it were not for having been a fighter. Being a trainer is incredibly physically hard. I look at trainers and just think they're amazing, because as a fighter, we all just think about ourselves as like we're the only ones who are tired, like, oh my god, I'm doing all the work. And we do work very hard, but when you're like super proud of yourself because you hit 5 rounds in the morning and 5 rounds in the afternoon, and then you do your bag work and you're so tough and blah blah blah, your trainer held for like 10 people that day, which is 5 rounds each. So this is like 50 rounds that your trainer's doing and you're proud of your 10. You know what I mean? Like, just put it a little bit in context. They're not 20 years old. Trainers tend to be retired fighters, and retired after a while fighters, so they tend to be 30s or above, although there are some younger trainers. And it's a lot on your body to do that. So wrapping your wrists to hold pads to me is not like an insane thing. You wrap your wrists to punch things. It's a reasonable thing to do, because you're doing a lot of like repetitive impact. Trainers will wear like a knee brace kind of thing. And again, this is taking into account that while they are doing incredible physical labor in holding pads for many, many, many fighters during a day, these guys are not necessarily taking care of their bodies in other senses. They're not like doing physical therapy to make sure that they have the proper musculature to support knees as an aging physical person. You know, it's a lot of, not, I wouldn't say the most, like not the majority of, or even like a huge amount, but non-negligible number of trainers drink a lot, and are not in amazing health. They're, you know, smoking and all these things. So they're doing this incredible physical labor, but they're not also doing a lot of the physical work that you do in order to maintain that kind of labor. So as a fighter, running all the time, I don't stretch, but you're supposed to stretch. doing your kind of recovery and that kind of stuff. Trainers aren't really doing a lot of that because they're not considered athletes anymore, even though they're doing incredible things. So the wear and tear you see on your trainer is partially their age and partially that they're still doing physically intense things as they age, and it's not necessarily from being destroyed as a fighter kind of thing. There are lots of fighters in Thailand. There are so many people who were fighters. There are lots of people who had like fairly intense careers. You know, they fought in the provinces for many years. It's not like they fought 4 times when they were 10 and that was it. They fought for a really long time, and then they just didn't make it to Bangkok, or like didn't continue on with it, or whatever the thing is, and they go on into another career, and they're not suffering from like permanent injuries from doing 10 years or 7 years or whatever from training and fighting in Muay Thai and then going on and doing something else. I've been here doing this intensely for 13 years, and I've aged as I've done that, because time progresses in a linear fashion and all that kind of stuff. I've had very small bone breaks, like my hand, my foot, my nose. You know, I'm not like debilitated by that. I definitely feel the impact of working as hard as I do, but I've also never been this age having not done what I'm doing. So I don't think that I'm like wearing down my body in a way that like is different from just aging, and is probably slowing down a lot of the signs of aging from someone who would be like less active or not doing those things. So yes, there are absolutely people who have bad knees, bad wrists, whatever, due to their years of fighting. But it's also exacerbated from years of being a trainer. Like Lam Namoon wears knee pads or knee braces on both his knees when he's holding pads for people. I don't know that he was doing that when he had just retired. You know, he's in his 50s now, his early 50s now, and he held pads for people in his own gym for many, many years, and then he went to Singapore for a number of years. So like he's been doing non-fighter work that's putting wear on his body in the time since then, and that's not negligible. So I'm not saying that people don't get injured or don't have kind of potentially lasting effects from their years of being fighters. You know, huh? What I am saying is that when you, from afar, are trying to gauge what that means, one, there's a lot of context you need to put into it in order to make a more educated assessment of what that is. And two, especially when you're not in your own culture, and this counts for me. I've lived in Thailand for a long time now, but this is not my culture. I am very familiar with many aspects of it, but again, because this is not where I'm from, there are things to me that are not invisible that are invisible to people from here, and there are things to me that are invisible that are not invisible to people who are from here. So I don't know if I switched that around or didn't. I forgot what I said. But when you're looking at someone, what you're looking at might not be what you'd be looking at if you were looking at someone from your own culture. So when you see your trainer wrapping their wrists or wearing a knee brace or whatever the thing is, you're noticing that because you want to like take into account, or you want to like kind of, oh, what am I looking at? Like, what's going on here? I'm trying to take in a lot of information to understand something. Whereas if you go to your like weightlifting gym, you're not paying attention to how many of those dudes are wearing knee braces or how many of them are wearing a wrist brace in order to lift weight or something like that. Because these dudes are in their 40s and 50s, not because they're Thai and we're fighters. So that is my trying to put into context. And basically the answer to that question is, which is not the question that was posed, is it's complicated. Like it's complicated when you're trying to assess how much damage people take doing decades of any kind of sport. Yeah, it's going to impact you, but it might not necessarily be the entire story of what you're looking at any given time. And it just irks me that people look at it from the outside and make this like the way Thais train is too hard, or the way Thais are doing something is fucking up their bodies, or blah blah blah, or all of this stuff. Because I don't know, man. I don't think we know. So that's that.